Talking trash, what archaeology and art history have to say about everyday objects. Hi everyone, I'm Ria, a second year MPhil student in Islamic art and archaeology. Today I'll be giving you a brief introduction to the work that archaeologists and art historians do, and how this approach can inform our understanding of the past. My hope is that this video will provide you with the opportunity to think about the social and cultural meanings of everyday objects, things that you or a person from the past might find in your bedroom, trash, or local store. In considering these objects, we can begin to think about how material culture can provide us with different evidence and therefore inferences about the past. Perhaps most importantly, I want this video to offer you a taste of what it might be like to study a material culture-based subject like archaeology or art history at university. Before attending university in the States, I had no idea what it meant to conduct research in either of these disciplines, or really how they differed from other types of historical inquiry. I hope this video begins to answer those questions for you. So before we continue, I want to take a moment and give you a general idea of what the disciplines of archaeology and art history are exactly and what they can offer our study of the past. Generally speaking, archaeology and art history are mutually reinforcing disciplines concerned with the study of culture and society through objects and art. They both use material from the past to offer inferences, ideas backed up by historical evidence, to suggest what the past may have been like. However, their methodologies and sometimes material focus differ. Art historians tend to consider objects, art, and visual culture in their historic context to study the past, whereas archaeologists study human activity through the excavation and analysis of a more broadly defined category called material culture. This presentation is focused on material culture, which is a blanket term for the matter generated, altered, or repurposed by people. It's a large category that includes everything from the most impressive works of art and architecture to everyday objects like a pencil or plastic bag, to environmental remains like seeds and wood, to even human remains. Material culture tends to be a term used by archaeologists and anthropologists, but I believe it to be a helpful one in thinking through how material matter, even seemingly unimportant objects or wastes, can help paint a picture of culture and society. Rubbish is therefore incredibly important for archaeologists. Archaeologists devote a great deal of energy to excavating, categorizing, and studying the detritus of the past in order to better understand its cultural context and the people who produced it. On excavation sites, archaeologists aim to recover an array of discarded materials. Recovered material culture tends towards the mundane: pottery sherds, animal bones left over from a meal, worn tools, or other objects that have lost their utility. Sometimes these items were intentionally thrown away and are found in dumps, trash pits, and even latrines. At other times, however, archaeologists uncover objects that appear to have been lost or abandoned wherever their owner happened to be at the time. On rare occasions, a lucky archaeologist will uncover material culture that appears to have been hidden or set underground for safekeeping. Think a coin hoard or even food storage. I spent at least a week one summer excavating a dolium, a large ceramic vessel that appeared to have been placed in the ground for grain storage. It's rare for an archaeologist to discover unbroken, carefully crafted objects. Our data more often comes from fragments, scattered material remnants, and vestiges of everyday people. These archaeological remains, particularly when considered in combination with other material or historical data, can help archaeologists reconstruct facets of life in the past. Archaeological data can provide indications of a site's historic environmental conditions, as well as its population, their diet, occupation, daily activities, trade habits, religious beliefs, and much, much more. However, rubbish is also the purview of art historians. The case study I want to talk to you about today is a source for much of what we know about medieval Fustat, which today is called Old Cairo. It also provides a great deal of information about Jews in the Middle East and North Africa, as well as medieval trade. In 1896, a Cambridge University scholar named Solomon Schechter entered the Geniza at the Ben Ezra Synagogue in Old Cairo. A geniza is a storage area in a Jewish cemetery or synagogue for the temporary holding of religious books and papers before burial. Because in Judaism, materials with the name of God written on them cannot be thrown out, synagogues or a Jewish community will have a geniza for temporary storage. Unusually, the Cairo geniza was never emptied for burial. In effect, the geniza became a sealed archive, or if you prefer, a scrap heap, containing over 400,000 Jewish manuscript fragments, Fatimid administrative documents, and materials pertaining to daily life. Incredibly, these textual fragments span over 1,000 years, dating from the 9th to 19th centuries. The Cairo Geniza is also exceptional for its breadth of material. Not only were typical liturgical texts placed in the Geniza, but so were administrative documents, legal documents, private letters, marriage contracts, merchants' accounts books, a variety of philosophical and scientific writings, and just materials relating to all matters of daily life. I find the two Geniza documents located on the right-hand side of this slide particularly fascinating. The upper image is of a petition written in Arabic, but it also has Hebrew writing. This petition provides an indication of the multilingual nature of the Cairo Geniza and the community of Jews whose documents it contains. The Geniza contains many documents in liturgical languages like Hebrew and Aramaic, but it also has those in Arabic, the dominant language of local Fustat society. In addition, correspondence with farther afield Jewish communities was written in languages like Judeo-Greek, Judeo-Persian, and even Yiddish. The document on the lower right of the slide is something we're all far more familiar with. It's essentially a school primer. This primer appears to have been used by Jewish children learning their letters, basically how to write, which gives us some indication of what children's education may have been like at the time. It's a bit unclear as to why the Jews associated with the Ben Ezra Synagogue in Cairo transferred so many of their non-religious documents to the Geniza. It seems that anything written in Hebrew letters was likely deemed sacred, and that's how they made it in, but other documents may have simply been placed in the Geniza by accident or as a matter of sheer laziness, as document owners didn't want to go to the trouble to sort through their papers. Regardless, their trash has become our scholastic treasure. The Geniza fragments have now been archived in a variety of libraries around the world, including at the Bodleian Library here at the University of Oxford, which has a collection of 25,000 Geniza folios. In 1973, Dr. William Rathje established the Tucson Garbage Project. Drawing on the methodology and techniques of archaeology, he and his students began studying the contents of Tucson residents' waste. They were among the first practitioners of a new subdiscipline known as contemporary archaeology. Today, I want you to participate in this practice and become contemporary archaeologists in your own right and partake in a modified version of the Garbage Project. I'm going to provide a few directions and helpful hints, and then you can pause the video to complete this activity on your own. All right, so we're going to excavate your rubbish bin together. If you could just grab a pencil and a sheet of paper, and of course, a rubbish bin, that's a good place to start. Once you've located all the appropriate tools, you're going to conduct a survey. So you're going to put on a timer for 3 minutes, and I want you to write down all the material culture you can observe in your rubbish bin. If you feel inspired, feel free to excavate a little bit, dig around, but no requirements to do that. And following your 3 minutes of survey, take roughly 2 to 3 minutes to make categories of the different objects that you found. So potential categories could be something based on color. So all these objects were red, or based on type of objects. So this was food, these were paper scraps, things like that. And finally, after you've created your categories, I want you to look at all that information and ask yourself what type of person might be using this and why. How can you take what you've observed and draw conclusions about it? So perhaps I would see a bunch of different food scraps in the garbage can behind me, say, oh, well, this person was maybe a vegetarian because there's no meat in here. So observations like that. All right, so why don't you pause your video and go do that activity. Now that you've done that, I just want to take a second and examine some of your findings. So in our last video, I was talking about how an inference someone could draw perhaps from looking at my trash can is that I'm a vegetarian. And that's actually not true. I don't eat much meat, but I'm not a vegetarian. So I want to think about ways that we can challenge the assumptions we bring to our work and the assumptions we make about the past based on a limited data set. So I think it's always good to ask about our data. Are any of the inferences we're drawing based on cultural assumptions? So, girls are more likely to be vegetarian. They like the color pink. That's not true. You could have a trash can full of pink things that belongs to a guy, or full of vegetarian things, right? So it's always good to probe if our assumptions are actually mapping onto reality now or, in the past. Something that may be true in our culture today may not be true for a culture 1,000 years ago. Another thing I want us to think about is holes in the data. What's missing from the garbage can, and why might that be important? So in my garbage can, there isn't meat, and perhaps one could see that as a sign of vegetarianism. It might just be that I didn't have access to meat this week, or I made other dietary choices. So it's good to consider what might just be an abnormality or sort of an outlier. And sometimes in, the material record, we don't have much indication of certain types of people. And unfortunately, that isn't an outlier, but might be indicative of a larger trend about who has power. So if we think about the fact that we don't have much indication of what the daily life of a slave, in the medieval world might look like, that's because they didn't have, access to the tools for reading and writing. We can consider that as an absence and might want to note that as well. So in summary, I hope you found that sorting objects and other types of information can make it easier to digest. So just like you broke down your findings into categories, you can do that as a researcher in university. Always consider how your biases inform the inferences you make or the conclusions you draw. And finally, archaeology and art history can offer different historical information than the written record. You might find evidence of people who weren't able to read and write through archaeology in a way you don't in written history, which is really exciting. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. If you want to learn more, there are further resources on the website linked to here. I've included some highlights of things I've really enjoyed learning through, particularly the 99% Invisible podcast, the Dirt podcast, and this New Yorker article, Treasures in the Wall, which discusses the Cairo Geniza. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope that the next time you toss your trash, you consider what a future archaeologist might think about you.